afternoon to everyone. I welcome you to another session of our program, An Ode to the Glorious Past. In this, we try to pay homage to our past presidents. We try to remember their work. This is a way of, showing our respect to them. And we are here yet again with another great personality, Srimati Lakshmi Menon. She knows no introduction, but I think today is a day which I would request our president, Srimati Sheila Kakreji, to throw some light on the day why we are having this webinar today. I would invite Srimati Sheila Kakreji to give us an idea about this program. Over to you, Sheila ji.
Thank you, Yutika ji, and namaskar and welcome to all my dear sisters and the guests who have joined in today's webinar, taking us on the virtual journey with All India Women's Conference, along with the most versatile 24th President, Srimati Lakshmi Menon, from January 1955 to December 1957. Today is her death anniversary, and every year we at AIWC head office gather together to pay our respects to our beloved president. We have taken this opportunity today to do it virtually with you all. We will be in silence for next 2 minutes and then continue. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. On behalf of All India Women's Conference family, I welcome our speakers, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Shri T.P. Srinivasan, Professor Indira Rama, Mrs. Bhuvaneshwari Ravindran, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi, and VP Ashita Sharan, Zonal Organizer Usha Nair, who have coordinated in arranging this session. I extend my gratitude to all the relatives who have shared their fond memories of Srimati Lakshmi Menon in the videos for all of us. I cannot forget special blessings by respected Indira ji Pillai, Usha Nairji's mother. Lakshmi Menon, as president of AIWC from 1955 to 57, had in her team as vice president Srimati Indira Maidev from Pune, Srimati Lakshmi Bai Nimbalkar from Pune, Srimati Sudha Muzumdar from Kolkata, Srimati Kameshwaramma Kupusami from Mysore, Begum Hussain Ali Khan from Hyderabad, Srimati Sarojini Mehta, Mumbai. Honorary General Secretary was Srimati Pushpa Mehta from Mumbai, and Honorary Treasurer Srimati Mehraben Zabwala was also from Mumbai. Traveling 30 years down the memory lane, I recollect her frail figure clad in white khadi sari in early 19s, speaking at the AIWC conference at Trivandrum, where I saw her for the first time. I had joined the organization around late 80s. The impression of her words straight from the bottom of her heart, emphasizing on education of women of all age groups, are still alive in my heart. After that, I did not get any opportunity to meet her as I was associated with AIWC from Mumbai. I have heard a lot about her nature of work, dedicated services to the society, mostly from Shobnatai Ranade. Lakshmiji's values influenced many. She had no desire or attachment for materialistic things and accepted whatever came her way as a gift from God to her. Hence, she had no second thought while mortgaging her ornaments and property while purchasing land for AIWC. She had a dream to educate our village sisters through All India Committee for Eradication of Illiteracy among Women. She was the chairperson of Kasturba Gandhi National Memorial Trust from 1972 to 1985. The concept of celebrating Mother's Day at Aga Khan Palace, Pune, was a gift by her. Lakshmiji thought that Kasturba's birthday should be commemorated as Mother's Day and should be observed as Mother's Day not only at Kasturba Trust but in every home. Her various positions in the political life gave her ample opportunities to do selfless service. We at AIWC are ever so grateful to God for having her as our president with a powerful vision. For the interest of our guests today, I take the opportunity to introduce AIWC in few lines. All India Women's Conference, 94 years pan-India NGO established in 1927 with the primary focus of women's education and empowerment, has steadily grown into a pioneer women's organization working towards socio-economic empowerment of women. Organization has membership of over 1 lakh dedicated women volunteers working through a network of more than 500 branches across India. At the international level, AIWC has consultative status with the UN ECOSOC and observer status with UNFCCC. The organization has been working at the grassroots level to make sure that the benefits of development reach the women from lower income groups, marginalized communities, and the most vulnerable sections of the society. Women's literacy has been the primary focus of AIWC right from the foundation. Several campaigns and programs had been initiated by the organization in this regard, including non-formal education in primary level for school, dropout girls, and condensed courses in education for adult women and girls through AIWC branches. Besides literacy, skill training, socio-economic programs, part-time dispensary, community awareness programs, women's safety, Swachhata Abhiyan, climate change and environment, communal harmony and peace, gender sensitization programs for youth, enhancing life skills programs for adolescents, health camps are also being run by AIWC. 22 working women's hostels, 13 short stay homes for distressed women, and counseling centers and senior citizen homes in India are also a part of AIWC's activities. Thank you all for giving me a patient hearing. I hand over to Yutika ji to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila ji. Thank you for those words of, telling us about how Srimati Lakshmi Menon was instrumental in beginning so many things. She began so many programs and all. Truly a person whose work spoke more than the words. That's where we are with her. And without wasting much time, let's begin with the program. As this program has been very meticulously organized by Srimati Usha Nair and her colleagues of the South Zone. And this has been organized into 4 segments. Quickly, I'll give you an overview of the program. The first segment will cover early life and education and family of Srimati Lakshmi Menon. The second segment will cover her role in the UN and as a minister. And the third segment is about her term as the president of AIWC. And the last segment deals with the years in Trivandrum after her return there from 1966 to 94. So let's begin the program with the first segment, where we are going to hear about the life, education, and family of Srimati Lakshmi Menon, our 24th president. And for this, I would like to invite Srimati Bhuvaneshwari Ravindran. She has a PowerPoint presentation and has some videos to show. Srimati Bhuvaneshwari Ravindran.
Excuse me, please. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Can you just interrupt, please? I think the YouTube, there will be YouTube streaming, but it's not started. So I just thought
It has started.
It has started?
Yes. I'm sending the link soon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I resume here. She's Mrs. Bhuvaneshwari is presently the secretary and standing committee member from Suvarna branch of Kozhikode branch of Aiwc. She is the vice president of the Saksham branch. This is an organization working for the benefit of persons with disabilities and a member of Bharatiya Vichar Kendram. She retired as the director in the Ministry of Home Affairs and served in various capacities in the Ministries of Commerce and Industry and in several, ministries in high positions, and has part of her official duties. She has traveled to several countries all over the world. So I now invite you, Bhuvaneshwari ji, with your presentation and your talk.
Thank you.
You can share your screen.
Yeah. Is it visible?
Yes.
Yes. I'll send the link also.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Dr. Yutika, for those nice, kind words. First of all, let me thank for giving me this opportunity to make this presentation today about Srimati Lakshmi and Menon, the 24th President of Aiwc. It's a great honor for me from the South Zone to be a part of today's program. Particularly today being her death anniversary, it's all the more apt today for having this webinar. In my segment, I will be covering her life in general, about her family, her childhood memories, education, marriage, and career in general. After the presentation, there are 4 videos which I'll present. Now I move on to my presentation. Mrs. Lakshmi Menon was born in an aristocratic Nair family in Travancore on 27th March 1899. This is the photograph of her father, Sri M. Ramavarma Tampan. He was an eminent educationalist and a reformist and a postgraduate of those days, which was a rarity those days. Incidentally, he was also the principal of Zamorin's Guruvayurappan College, which is one of the prestigious educational institutions in Kozhikode from 1924 to 27. Mrs. Lakshmi Menon's mother, Srimati Madhavi Kutiyamma, left for heavenly abode when Lakshmi was just 6 years old. Her mother was also 24 years only. Then young Lakshmi was brought up by her grandmother, Lakshmi Kutiyamma, and she had 3 siblings, 1 elder sister and 2 brothers. Her elder sister, Ammukutti, she passed away in childhood only. And only one of her brothers, Mr. Madhav Nair, had 3 children. This is the ancestral home where Lakshmi Menon grew up and also spent her last years of life. This house was constructed by her maternal grandfather, who was judge of Trivandrum High Court, Mr. T.R. Narayana. He also died young at the age of 46. Actually, how this name came up, the house is overlooking an open plain, and it's a Maidan sort of thing, and that is how it was named as Plain View. Lakshmi Menon inherited this house. This is very common in Nair families. In Kerala, Nair families follow the matriarchal system, where girls inherit the title and property from the mother. Ancestral descendants and family name is carried on through maternal instead of paternal line. That way, in Nair families, girls are given a lot of importance. This house was donated to Sharda Mission on her death. Now, we have an audio excerpt from an interview of Mrs. Menon with Madhavi Ravindranath, director AIR, where she talks about her childhood and recalls the day she lost her mother, and also how her grandmother brought her up and what guided her conduct and behavior. I'll play the audio.
The other things, the next thing that I remember very closely is my mother's death. She was all right, and we used to sit behind her when she played the veena. And I still remember the smell of the oil that she used for the hair and the strains of veena. I used to sleep because we used to be fed in those days at about 6 o'clock and then again woken up at 9 o'clock or so for a cup of milk and so to bed. And then suddenly one fine morning, when we were getting ready to go to school, my father said, "The children shall not go to school today." And we went to the other building where we had the kitchen and did not know what was happening here. Then suddenly my father said, my mother wanted to see my sister, elder sister, who is 2 years older than myself. And I got very jealous. Why only my sister? What about me? So I also rushed in and found my mother must have been nearly dying. And my father said, "The children have come." And she said, "Yes." And then we heard nothing more about it except that she was being prepared to go to the funeral pyre. After that, of course, we did not know what death is, what our loss of mother meant, but we found my grandmother crying and not getting up at all. Then we thought it must be something very serious. And my little brother, who was 2 years old, was taken to see mother, and he did not know anything except that he embraced the servant who was carrying him and cried for him and not for mother. These are all the reminiscences of my very early childhood till my mother's death at the age of 6. And then my grandmother brought us all up, 4 children, and also my aunt's daughter who had lost her mother earlier, and we have 5 children in the house. It must be quite a handful because we were young and very naughty and run about in the big compound, fall, fight with each other, and all these things happened. But my grandmother brought us up, I should say, in the right way, because she taught us prayers. She taught us many things which I still remember, which have guided my conduct and behavior later on.
Okay, this was her voice that we were hearing. Now, coming to her school education. Her initial education was in Kudipallikudam. It's a neighborhood school run by families in that area, basically for the children of those families. Her formal school started in Fort Mission School, Trivandrum, then on to Maharaja School, and she had written Paravur. She passed school final from Chenganu Government School. Her father was a headmaster there. This was actually boys' school, and she was the only girl among 30 boys. In fact, there is an instance I want to say here. Generally, Lakshmi liked to talk a lot, but she was not able to speak to anyone in the school since all were boys and she was the only girl. So one day she came back and complained to her father, "If it goes on like this, I'll soon forget to even speak." So that is how bad she felt about keeping silent for such a long time. Then about her higher education, she did her BA from Maharaja's Arts College, then MA she did privately from Trivandrum, Maharaja's High School. She was teaching in Maharaja's High School at that time. And then teacher's training course she did from Lady Whittington College, Madras. Then she went on to London to study in Maria Gray Training College. This was here in London that she met Pandit Nehru for the first time in 1927. She then did her LLB from Lucknow University. That was after her marriage to Professor Nandan Menon. About her career, my focus will be on teaching career because other things are covered by others. She says teaching was her first love. In her article on Second String to My Bow, she says she was often asked why she chose politics as a career. Then the two quotes here, which are on the screen, are her responses on how being a teacher positively influenced her career as parliamentarian. I found them very interesting, so I put this quote over here. I'm not going to read that because it's already there on the screen. She went on to start, her first job was in Queen Mary's College, Madras, as a lecturer in 1922. In one of her interviews, she told that before she got this job in Queen Mary's College, she had applied for a job in the Women's College, Trivandrum, but that she did not get. The reason given was she had excessive interest in public affairs. Actually, it's a very common knowledge that those days there were several such instances where such highly qualified persons were denied jobs just because they had such inclinations. And in Madras, this was also the period when she connected with several WIA and AIWC stalwarts like Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, Muthu Lakshmi Reddy, Margaret Curzon, Sarojini Naidu. In particular, she was very close to Sarojini Naidu and even her family. Sarojini Naidu became her mentor and prompted her to join AWC in 1928. Then she went on to teach in Girls' High School, Kolkata, Isabella Thebam College in Lucknow, and became Principal Women's Training College in Patma. From 1952 onwards, she was a state commissioner for guides in Bihar. She, in fact, her association with Scouts and Guides had started quite much earlier, around the time when Baden Powell and Annie Besant had started the Scouts movement in India. In 1920, when Sri B.K. Krishna Menon started the movement in the Malabar region of Kerala, same time she had initiated the movement in Travancore. As I already said, there are separate sessions on Lakshmi Menon's career as a diplomat, parliamentarian, work with AIWC, and also post-1966 period where after she retired from active politics. So I'll not be speaking on those. I would just like to make a mention about the Patma Bhushan Award, which she received in 1957 for her outstanding work in public affairs. She was the first woman from Kerala to receive this award. We in AWC can be proud of the fact that this award was bestowed on her while she was a president of AWC. Of course, there's a long string of AIWC members who have won this award in this honor, and Lakshmi Menon and several others after her continued this legacy. In the very recent past, Srimati Sarojini Varadappan and Srimati Shobhana Ranade were also awarded Patma Bhushan in 2009 and 2011. There were other things also, like her great role in the insurance sector as the director of LIC. Then she was also involved with the setting up of the ISRO in Tumba, in Trivandrum. Now I'll come to her marriage with Professor Nandan Menon. She met Professor V.K. Nandan Menon in Kolkata in a mutual friend's house. Mr. Menon at that time was a lecturer in political science at the University of Lucknow. They got married on 12th May 1930. That time she was already 31 years old, and those days it was actually considered very unusual for a girl to get married so late. It was a simple marriage function at Lucknow, at Mr. Menon's friend Mr. Gupta's house. They both were very well qualified and came from similar social and academic background. They had 44 years of happy married life. Sadly, they had no children. Now, talking of this couple, this extraordinary couple, both were temperamentally very different, but totally compatible. Mr. Nandan Menon preferred a quiet life. He was gentle, calm, and spoke very little, very mild-spoken person. But Lakshmi Menon was always throbbing with energy, active, exuberant, and a public figure. Mr. Menon had given a free hand to his wife in all domestic matters. And Lakshmi Menon actually very happily accepted the role and entirely took care of the household, managing everything despite her busy schedules, even while she was a minister. She had told this in an interview also. Very happy she was to do that. They both liked reading a lot. Now, Professor Nandan Menon had a huge collection of books, which was donated to the Trivandrum Public Library. And I have a photograph here on the screen, which is that library. Then about Mr. Menon, Mr. Menon was very quiet, but he had a subtle sense of humor. I'll just tell one or two instances of that. In fact, Mr. Menon likes to keep everything neat and tidy, particularly his bookshelf. Books were kept very orderly. Then, but whenever he noticed any book or things out of place, he would just say, "Oh, I'm sure Kuttiyamma must have gone this way." By Kuttiyamma, he was referring to Lakshmi Menon. He used to call, she used to be called Kutti at home. So, and another instance I want to say here is when those who are very close to them come visiting them, he used to ask them, "Did you see the deputy minister? You should see her first," meaning that after all, she is the minister and she is the more important person to be seen first. Such was a style and a sense of humor. Now, this is an LWC publication I'm going to talk about, Profiles of Lakshmi and Menon. This was published on 30th November 1995, the first death anniversary. This book, I found that the best way to, her personality was par excellence in several ways. And the best way to understand her character and personal profile, I found that this was through this book. The articles in this book really helped me for preparing this meeting. And for that, let me put on record, I'm extremely grateful to our respected president, Srimati Sheila Kakre, who promptly provided me with a copy when I requested for it. Now, this is a copy of from the book, editorial committee of that book, where you can see a number of familiar persons' names. Shobhana Ranade was a convener, and our zonal organizer, Usha Nayar's mother, Srimati Indira Ramakrishna was also a member of this committee. Incidentally, Mrs. Pillai had shared some interesting anecdotes about her first meeting with Lakshmi Menon and also her close connection to her in later years. That I found it on the net. Now, 24 distinguished personalities, all those who worked with her and very close to her, had written about. Actually, I was amazed to see so many interesting aspects about her in this book, but I can't share most of it. I'm just sharing a few of them as samples. Several of the articles said had references about her active involvement with the AICEIW, an institution which she was a founder. Then her passion and commitment in the field of eradication of illiteracy of Indian women. Then about her dedication to AIWC and valuable contributions. In particular, as Madam Sheila Kakreji already mentioned about her contribution for the building purpose, I would like to mention about the recollections of Srimati Sushila Nayar, and Lakshmi Rakhuramaya on how both Mr. Menon and Lakshmi Menon used up their PF and other savings to help acquiring the land for the AWC building at Bhagwan Das Road. And how Lakshmi Menon was instrumental in Pandit Nehru inaugurating the AWC office. Now, here, I could see a majority of them referred to her as a friend, philosopher, guide, and mentor, and several superlatives about her simplicity, hospitality, culinary expertise, and all. Now, these are again few of the things which I thought I should share here. Some comments from various persons, colleagues. I'm not going to read it out. Actually, in our brochure, Supriya ji, that beautiful brochure that Supriya ji had brought out, she had already given a lot of outstanding qualities, which aptly described her profile. Here are some more, for us to go through. Here again, some more very interesting descriptions. Deeply involved in politics, but was not not a politician, and attitude of disinterested interest, attachment without attachment. These such things really attracted me, and I wanted to show it around here. Now, I think I'll now end this presentation with special thanks to Srimati Sheila Kakre, President, and Kuljit Kaur, Secretary General, for the help and encouragement. Then Srimati Usha Nair, Zonal Organizer, for reposing so much of faith in me, helping, guiding me at each and every stage, constantly providing me with valuable inputs for this presentation. I'm sure I would not have been able to make this presentation without those inputs. And of course, thank you all for your patient hearing. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhuvneshwari ji. That was a very elaborate and very nice presentation with the video. Particularly interesting was the audio, in her own voice, which was something new to all of us. Of course, the souvenir that you referred to, which was published in 1995, is also in the library. And being the member in charge library, I would request you to come sometime and see all the material. Many more things are there in the library. I hope you get help in further research. So we move to the next segment of the program, which talks about
Yutika, now she will play the videos. This segment is not over. She has she will play the videos. Please go on.
Okay, there are more videos. Okay.
Yeah, there are 4 videos from the relatives.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on. Yeah, go to that.
Okay, I'll now share the videos. Just give me a minute, I'll open it. And okay, this is the first video. It's of an interaction with Srimati Shanta Prahlad, wife of Mr. K.M. Prahlad, who was Mrs. Menon's brother, Madhav Nair's third son. Incidentally, I would like, Mr. Prahlad passed away last year on 26 November. It is his wife who will be talking to us. Mrs. Shanta is also from the same family. I'll play the video now.
Srimati Shanta Prahlad from Delhi with us. Welcome, Mrs. Prahlad.
I'm Shanta Prahlad, Mrs. Menon's nephew's wife. She is my mother's first cousin also. My mother, Lakshmi Menon, and her 2 brothers, they are all born and brought up in the same house. She lost her mother when she was 6 years old. And my mother also.
We can't.
In front of their house, there was a very big pond. So grandmother used to take them to give them bath. But my mother and the other brothers, they used to play around and they run around. But my grandmother used to say, Lakshmi, sit. She quietly, she will sit and she will not go anywhere. Such obedient child she was. My mother used to say that.
Can you say something about her education, going to Chennai and London and all for studies, and which was rare those days?
She was influenced by her father. He was a learned man. He was MA that time, and he was the principal of Samarins College from 1924 to 1927. He was such a kind-hearted man. After finishing her studies from Trivandrum, she went to Madras, then to Lucknow, and from there she went to London. She was the first Nair lady MA. So she got a gold medal from some Nairs. So that medal is with me. She gifted it to me, so I am kept it. One small incident I want to say, whenever Mrs. Menon comes to Delhi to attend meetings, she used to stay with us. My husband was interested in solving crossword puzzles those days. One word he could not solve. Then he asked, we used to call her Putti Chechi. Putti Chechi, what is the name of the countryside liquor shop? Immediately she said, speak easy.
Speak easy. Okay.
Yeah. Those days, she remembers everything, and her memory was very sharp. Her vocabulary was wonderful.
Was it at the Masjid Moat house where she used to come?
Yeah. Whenever she comes here, she will always invite Dr. Sushila Nair, Ashoka Gupta, and Miss Rana De. So for breakfast, they all will come. But my aunt, Putti Chechi, we call her Putti Chechi, she's always in a hurry. When they come, they will all sit near the table. Shanta, serve food. Shanta, bite. They were always in a hurry. But immediately I will manage to serve. But they used to enjoy my breakfast.
When she was based in Trivandrum? Or?
Yeah. She was in Trivandrum only. By that time, she lost her husband also, Mr. Nandan Menon. He was Vice Chancellor of Kerala.
Mrs. Menon was a very simple person in the sense that she always dressed in a very simple way with no ornaments and no makeup or anything. Can you tell us something about her personal habits?
Yeah, she used to wear only khadi sarees, but later on she has started wearing white handloom sarees. And she had very little hair. With a black thread hairband, she used to tie her hair. That was her makeup, nothing more. One watch she used to wear. Cooking, she was an expert in, but whatever is available in the compound, she will not buy any vegetables in Trivandrum. Spices she can't have. So without chilies, we will cook for her. Whenever she comes to Delhi also, I used to cook without chilies. But last visit, she asked for some pickle. That was before her death, her last visit to Delhi. It's 1 year or some few months back. I don't remember that.
Because I remember meeting her in Delhi when she was already in her 90s.
Yeah.
Till then. Yes.
Now, a photograph of Mr. Prahlad, Mrs. Shanta Prahlad, and Arunima Menon with a smiling Mrs. Menon.
Okay, now the next video is an interaction with Sri Vijay Menon, Professor Nandan Menon's nephew.
We have with us.
I'll just share the video. Mr. Vijay Menon is a leading, he's an 86-year-old person, and he's settled in Trichy district. Just now, recently, he has moved to US to her daughter, who will also be that next video is of hers. I'll just play the video.
Sri Vijay Menon, who is nephew of Srimati Lakshmi Menon's husband, Professor Nandan Menon. A very good afternoon to you, sir.
Lakshmi Menon used to be the wife of my maternal uncle, and they used to live in Patma.
Something about your background also, sir?
I was considered to be a rebel in the house. I didn't want to do medicine or engineering. And so my father said, okay, there is a school starting probably in Bombay teaching cooking. Why don't you go and try? So I said, okay. There I did 2 years course and then started teaching. Later on, I was told to go and start the college at Delhi at Bhushan. I moved over to the industry and I was there for about 50 years.
Can you tell us something about Professor Nandan Menon and their marriage, please?
He used to be teaching in Patma University, and while he was there, he was also the vice chancellor of that university. Then he was invited to Kerala to be the vice chancellor of Kerala University, and he stayed there for 2 or 3 years and then went back. After going back from here, he started teaching again in Patna and then started the institute called Indian Institute of Public Administration. He is the founder, and he used to take a lot of interest in the building of the place. About their marriage, we have heard one interesting thing. Her father used to say that Nandan deserves Kuti and not the other way around, even though we used to say Kuti deserved Nandan.
Any memories about your stay with Mrs. Menon in Delhi?
I was staying with her from 63 onwards. There used to be a lot of Congress bigwigs coming home. She was a regular host, but for arranging all these sort of things, she was the only person who used to do all the work. She used to be the parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister Nehru, and continuing there, she was made the Deputy Minister, External Affairs, and promoted later as Minister of State for External Affairs.
Now some family photographs.
Okay, next we have Arunima Menon. Actually, I should tell here that Mr. Menon, who just spoke to us, he was leading figure in hospitality industry and at top management positions in several renowned institutions like Taj, Oberoi, and all that. He pioneered the Hotel Management Institute in Delhi, that is the PUSA, Institute of Hotel Management and Catering Technology. Next, I'll share the video of Arunima Menon.
I'm Arunima Menon.
Arunima is in US, and incidentally, she was the very first contact that we got through her Facebook post on her great aunt, which led us to all the others whom we interviewed, like Mr. Achyuta Menon, her father, and Srimati Shanta Prahlad.
And I'm Srimati Lakshmi and Menon's grandniece. My paternal grandmother, Srimati Leela B. Menon, was her sister-in-law. My great uncle, Sri V.K. Nandan Menon, was my grandmother's oldest brother. My earliest memories of Kuttiyamai are when I was about 4 years old and having dinner at our ancestral house in Thrissur with my great uncle and her. I remember someone pouring water for me in a glass, and I quickly picked it up and toasted, saying cheers. And my great uncle started laughing in his hearty fashion. I remember that so well. Unfortunately, a year later, my memory is of his funeral, again in our ancestral house in Thrissur, and I remember seeing Kuttiyamai, her eyes full of tears, watching as the funeral pyre burnt. Kutyamai continued her close contact with her in-laws, with my grandmother and all her husband's other siblings, but she was very attached to my grandmother and my father, because she visited us wherever we lived in India, first in Bangalore and then in New Delhi as well, where we got to see her more often. When we were in Delhi, I was studying there and I got to spend much more time with her because she often stayed with us when she was in Delhi. She would come for all her All India Women's Conference meetings in Delhi, and when she stayed with us, one thing I noticed about her was that in those days she was already in her 90s, quite frail, but she never stayed quiet for a second. She would be up in the morning, and as soon as she woke up and had got ready, she would come straight into the kitchen. Often she would just come in her nightgown and start helping my mother with breakfast preparations or whatever my mother was doing in the kitchen. And then she would go get ready, have her meal, and then leave. And similarly, when she came back from her meetings at Aiwc, she would wash up and come straight back to help my mother in the kitchen, to do whatever she was doing. You know, she never stayed quiet for a second, even when she was in her 90s. I remember the people who visited her then were Srimati Sushila Nair, and I remember once Srimati Vasant Sathe visiting us when she stayed with us. Kutyamai liked being in the kitchen, and she always, scolded my mother, saying that you use too many vessels. A dish rather that she liked making was vegetable au gratin. She made it really well, and she generally liked a bland diet. And when we visited her in her Trivandrum house, Plainview, she grew a lot of stuff in her backyard in her house there, and I remember her collecting and giving my mother a whole lot of bay leaves from the tree that grew in her backyard. Kutyamai really cared about everyone, like I said, from the smallest to the highest in terms of social pecking order. That's one thing I always remember about her. I used to like writing letters, and she also loved writing letters, and so we wrote often and regularly to each other, sharing everything. One thing she emphasized was that she always wanted women to be financially and economically independent before they ventured into marriage, because she felt that that was a big security for their own futures. She was one person who was very honest. What she said is what she did. There was no duality in anything she said or did. So she was such an example for us growing. This is the key to the city of San Francisco that Kutyamai received. As you can see, her name is here, Madame Lakshmi and Menon. This is one of the only keepsakes that I had, which she gave me as a gift. And it's a very precious memory for me.
Okay, the last video now. It's a video from 3 of the grandchildren of Srimati Lakshmi Narayanan Nair. She was, Lakshmi Nair was Lakshmi Menon's cousin and a very close friend. Srimati Lakshmi Ravindran, Madan Venugopal, and Sri Lakshman are the 3 grandchildren who will be speaking.
I'm Lakshmi Ravindran.
In fact, they are speaking about the period when after she retired and she was settled in Trivandrum those days. And I want to say one more thing as Srimati Lakshmi Narayanan Nair. She was a great person. She was the head of department of the Department of Music in the College for Women in Trivandrum. She continued at that post for long 37 years. Now, the video.
I'm Lakshmi Ravindran, grandniece of Srimati Lakshmi and Menon, who we called Valimma. Valimma was a cousin of my paternal grandmother, Srimati Lakshmi and Nair. After my grandmother passed away, Valimma became a mother to my parents and a grandmother to my brothers and myself. An epitome of grace, simplicity, generosity, and humility, Valimma was an ocean of love and compassion for one and all. She liked to distribute all her material possessions to the poor and needy. I remember once we gifted a torch to her and she immediately gave it to her trusted assistant Rama, saying that he needed it more. Valimma never spoke about her achievements or her work as an external affairs minister. She loved to host lunches, tea parties, and dinners for us very often. Valimma was an indulgent great-grandmother to our children also. We are truly blessed to have been a part of a family and will cherish our memories of dear Valimma.
Hello, my name is Madan Venugopal. Srimati Lakshmi Menon was my grandmother's cousin, but she was much closer to us than that relationship indicates. I grew up in Trivandrum with my grandmother. Lakshmi Menon, or my Valimma, settled in Trivandrum on a return from Delhi around that time. And I got to know her as a child of 7 or 8. And she was a wonderful person, very affectionate, and she adopted us as her family. We did so many things together. I remember Valimma and Valichan, Professor Nandan Menon, they used to take us for movies, like The Sound of Music at that time, and invite us for sumptuous dinners and lunches at their place, Pineview. And they loved us as much as their own grandchildren. And that bond grew stronger after the demise of my grandmother, Lakshmi Nair, in 1968. Valimma then adopted us even closer. She followed our progress in school and continued to be close to us throughout at least my school days, my college days, till I left for North America for my graduate studies. Even after that point, she kept writing to me, and I so much enjoyed receiving those letters. She was very humble also. She never once spoke about her role as a minister or her time with, John F. Kennedy or Jawaharlal Nehru. To me, she still is an inspiration for integrity, affection, poise, elegance, and grace, and stewardship of women's causes, and being a role model for many people and helping so many people. I so cherish my time with her and being part of her life, and she being part of our life. Thank you.
Namaste. I am Lakshman, grandson of Lakshmi and Nair, a cousin and close associate of Lakshmi and Menon. I would like to recount my recollections of our family's association with the great lady. She was known as Kutti Chichi Valimma to us, and she was a huge part of our family's activities. After the demise of their parents, my father and his sister grew even more closer to Valimma, and that rubbed off on us too. She was part of all our get-togethers, all other activities connected with our family. Valimma lived in her palatial ancestral home, which is quite near the Secretariat in Trivandrum. And we used to be regular visitors there, and the house is so big inside and outside that we children had enough place to run around and play. Valimma used to take my brother and me to the Trivandrum beach and the backwaters nearby. On one such trip to the beach, she took the car to the airport and took us into one of the aircraft which was parked there. A folk of friendship, if I remember right. The pilot and the hostesses were enthusiastic and showed us around the plane, and also took us into the cockpit, which is quite different from the dashboard of a car as far as I was concerned. On the way out, the hostesses filled our pockets with toffees and the like. This was an experience which I would never ever forget. After I left to Bombay in the early 1980s to take up employment, I used to write to her regularly, and her replies were very, very prompt. And on her visits to the city of Bombay, she used to insist on me having dinner with us. Usually she used to stay with a family of 4 spinster sisters called Puvayas. They had this cute little cottage at the foot of Malabar Hill. So every time she came, she insisted on my going there and meeting her and having a meal with her. Our family is truly blessed to have had Valima amongst
Lakshmi Nair, cousin and close friend of Lakshmi and Menon. With Lakshmi Nair's grandchildren and their families.
Thank you. That was, we have just seen the last of the videos. I hope these videos would have given a glimpse of into her life. Thank you all for being so patient. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhuvneshwari ji. It was an amazing collection of videos and photographs, and it was really good to hear all that from so many family members are still there, and they are narrating their memories and reminiscences. That was truly interesting and gave us insight into her life. Thank you so much. That was a great collection. And I especially like the archival photographs. They were so rare, we had never seen them earlier. Thank you. Now we move on to the second segment of the program, where we are going to hear about her work with the UN and the Ministry of External Affairs. For this, I would like to invite Srimati Usha Nair ji to briefly just, you may introduce this segment and the videos that we are going to have. Srimati Usha Nair is the zonal organizer, South Zone B of AIWC, and has worked in several positions since 2002 in the AIWC. And she was the member in charge of climate change programs and was instrumental in getting the observer status for AIWC in 2013, and has represented AIWC in the several UN bodies and in programs which she has carried out. She has worked for 28 years as an officer in the Syndicate Bank and is a freelance writer and editor. So over to you, Usha ji, to introduce the second segment for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Yutika. Namaskar. I first of all thank head office bearers Sheila Kakre ji and Kuljit ji, Rehana ji, for giving us the opportunity to prepare this webinar. The South Zone B with branches in Kerala and Karnataka, we have prepared this webinar. I am very grateful to head office for giving us this great opportunity. This is the second segment of this webinar, and we focus on her as the country's representative at the UN. And she has worked in several arms of the UN. As you can see, we are just sharing a PPT. Just one slide. Next one, Bhuvneshwari. Yeah, these are just a gist of what she had done at the UN. So we have a video by Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Actually, because the session of Parliament is on, he was unable to join this or even send us a new video for this webinar. So what we are showing here is the excerpts from the talk that he delivered on 30th November 2020, that is last year, when we had commemorative webinar for Mrs. Lakshmi and Menon, and we are reproducing the portion where he talks about her work with the UN and what her great contributions have been there. So I request Bhuvneshwari to please play the video.
Okay.
To tell you that if you look at her time at the United Nations, it was quite remarkable that along with her illustrious female contemporaries like Hansa Mehta, who is now also being rehabilitated a bit in the popular imagination, Begum Hamid Ali, and of course Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, the best known of the lot, sister of Jawaharlal Nehru and president of the UN General Assembly, Lakshmi Menon's role in the United Nations has been recognized and celebrated for her pivotal role in advocating the cause of gender equality during the formative years of the United Nations. Scholars and experts studying India's contribution to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights point out that these Indian women, and these four in particular, the four I've just named, played the most crucial role in the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Not just, by the way, in the name of women's rights alone, but by ensuring the preservation of secular language and approaches to human rights, and at the same time stressing the indivisibility of human rights and the entire idea of non-discrimination as well as the right to work. I'll give you one example, of course, in terms of the business of gender-neutral language. The draft of the original charter, the original Universal Declaration of Human Rights, had somewhat old-fashioned, or what I might today call patriarchal or paternalistic language, such as all men are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed by nature with reason and conscience and should act towards one another like brothers. So all men and brothers. The assumption was, again, very paternalistic and anything but, I would say, equality was failed to be reflected in the language. So coming back to you on this subject, that draft was rightly objected to by Lakshmi and Menon. And she said she was the Indian representative to the third committee of the United Nations General Assembly that was trying to adopt this draft. And she said, you have to modify this language. How can you exclude women in this way? And it was her efforts that led to the final text of Article 1 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which said all human beings, it now says, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Even brotherhood was a concession to the men there, but not like brothers, which would have been totally sexist language. So she had an opportunity to speak about her approach during the drafting of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And Lakshmi Menon said at that time, and I quote, "The full significance of the Indian delegation's attitude in the third committee could only be understood when considered in relation to the decision taken by the Indian Constituent Assembly to include in the constitution of our country the same rights and freedoms as were proclaimed in the declaration." So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was born from the need to reaffirm those rights after their violation during the war. It was now more than ever necessary to reaffirm those rights. The remedies to be applied to humanity had to be adapted to the seriousness of the conditions in which it lived. And when conditions deteriorated, the remedy had to be all the stronger and more drastic. And so Lakshmi Menon continued, that was one of the reasons why the present declaration was fuller and more detailed than all the other similar declarations. Earlier declarations had not mentioned rights, such as the right to equal pay for equal, the right of mothers and children to social protection, whether the children were born in or out of wedlock, the right to education, equality of rights for men and women. Those rights, said Lakshmi Menon, were the expression of a new social order of true democracy based on social justice.
Thank you, Bhuneshwari. So after listening to that account of her remarkable work at the United Nations, now we move on to the second part of this segment. We have an eminent guest, Ambassador Sri T.P. Srinivasan, to tell us about her role as the Minister, Parliamentary Secretary first, then Deputy Minister and Minister of State in the Ministry of External Affairs. I request Yutika to please
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ushaji. I'll introduce.
And take on the session.
Yes. Thank you, Ushaji. So I would request Shri T.P. Srinivasan. He's an IFS for 37 years and retired in 2004. A former ambassador and permanent representative of India to the United Nations in Vienna. And he also represented the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. He represented India there. Then he was also ambassador in several places like Austria, Slovenia. He was there in the embassy in Washington, in Kenya, Nairobi, Fiji, and several other states and nations. And he served in various capitals of the world like Delhi, Tokyo, Thimphu, Moscow, New York, and Yangon. He has almost 20 years experience in multilateral diplomacy and has represented India at a number of international conferences organized by the UN. And he also represented India in the Commonwealth and the non-aligned movement, and has chaired several committees and conferences of the UN. He's currently the head of the Council of Higher Education of the state of Kerala. We invite you, sir, to take over the stage and give your talk on Srimati Lakshmi Menon as the minister in the Ministry of External Affairs. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm also grateful to Mrs. Usha Nair for asking me to be here. Well, it has been an hour of education for me because I very carefully heard all the presentations and the videos, because I had never seen Mrs. Lakshmi Menon, even though she had come to Trivandrum, and I happened to be from Trivandrum, but I was always away from Trivandrum when she was here. So I know her only by reputation, but I today got a very good glimpse of her personal life, her relationships, her work, but nobody said much about her work as a minister, probably leaving it to me to do that. But I can say that there is very little information on that, as those relatives pointed out. She never spoke about her role as a minister in the external affairs, if she could help it. And therefore, I had to dig up several documents. Mr. G. Kumar Pillai's book, he himself starts by saying that there is very little information on her, particularly on her work at the Ministry of External Affairs. So it becomes a very difficult job. So, but one can think of the role she played basically from the fact that she served in the Ministry of External Affairs at a crucial time. One thing is very important about India's foreign policy was because it was created by one person, Jawaharlal Nehru. And we were very fortunate that we have Pandit Nehru as our first Prime Minister, because he was one who understood India very well, as we saw in his book, Discovery of India. And he knew the world very well, as we know from his book, Glimpses of World History. And he wrote them in jail, not out of encyclopedias or Wikipedias or internet. So that shows the depth of his understanding of the country and the world. And that is why he was able to single-handedly create a foreign policy for India. And if you look at the history of his association with Lakshmi Menon, we'll realize that it was at that period that she was first his parliamentary secretary, which means a very important position. It is something like a special advisor or a special assistant in these days for the ministers, plus the additional possibility of her appearing in the parliament, because she had a role in the parliament also. So though we do not have much of what she wrote or what she advised Pandit Nehru to do, it is very, very clear that it was at that crucial point that she was there. And she must have contributed vastly, if not in formulating policy, but at least in presenting it and projecting it to the people. And that is what I noticed. Her experience, about which Shashi Tharoor spoke just now, in the UN is also very interesting for me, because many of these bodies, I have myself been the second committee and the third committee of the United Nations and several other General Assembly conferences, etc. So in these places, individually you make a big mark by contributing to the thinking and also formulating. And India's contribution has always been, all these years, was that we always were for peace, of course, non-violent, of course, disarmament, of course, but also for amity among the countries. So our role was not really to seek something from the UN, but to give to the world our experience. And that is something that we taught to the world. And that is why, even when it was a poor country, when Mrs. Lakshmi Menon was in power, also it had no great resources. We did not have great friends because we are in the non-aligned movement. But still, India was able to shape the agenda of the United Nations. And that is where she has played a big role, because she went to several of these functional committees and functional fora. Of course, General Assembly and Security Council are more formal. But she went to these committees and she always reflected the feminine point of view, because at that time there was hardly any attention given to that. But her focus was more than international politics, her focus was basically on social living in a new country and how it was shaping up. Maybe she would have been as good a minister of education or social welfare, because education was her real forte, not foreign policy. But it was very obvious that Pandit Nehru picked her up for very high responsibilities. She probably shied away from it, from what we hear. She was thinking that she'll do it as a part-time, and she did not put her heart into it that much initially, till she became the deputy minister, which meant a lot of responsibilities, travel and speech making. I was able to get hold of 3 or 4 speeches of hers, 1 or 2 at the United Nations and elsewhere where she spoke about foreign policy. You will see that this exactly, she was the spokesperson of Pandit Nehru. Pandit Nehru could not have spoken a better spokesperson. And so she reflected his thoughts, since we have seen his other speeches, etc. And with a sense of pride, she projected Pandit Nehru's foreign policy and gave it a rationale. And she virtually worshipped him. And she kept quoting from other people to say, without Pandit Nehru, what India could have been. It's not her words. So, and this we all know. There would have been no Indian foreign policy. There would have been no respect for India to this extent. And the kind of things that Pandit Nehru did for the UN and the foreign policy. Of course, we all blame him for taking the case of Kashmir to the United Nations. But the best explanation has been given by her, where she talks about Pandit Nehru not going to war the first year of his prime ministership. That would have been unthinkable. And though it is true that the United Nations did not help us with Kashmir, we learned this lesson. Don't go to the United Nations for help. Go to the United Nations to contribute to whether it is climate change or environment or decolonization or disarmament, whatever, you go there to share your experience. And that was Panditji's approach. And in Lakshmi and Menon's speeches, this comes out very clearly. And she rationalized non-aligned movement clearly when she said, as a newly free country, we wanted to be left alone to fulfill our destiny. And so she had a very clear sense that what Pandit Nehru was doing was to keep aloof from the geopolitical struggles of the world and carve out for India a place in the global geopolitics. So, though she is not her work or what files she wrote or what she recommended, all these we don't have. There is no such record. But looking at that time, particularly in 1962, I read a speech which she gave in 1962 in June, not before the Chinese aggression. And of course, the atmosphere was tense, but she did not speak about that. She spoke only about India's role in the world. And then when Panditji fell sick, and her last months and years, very few years, 2 years, I think. And I think that's probably the time when she was even more active and she was made into a Minister of State. Of course, even today in the ministry, the Minister of State is not a particularly functional role, because the Minister of External Affairs and the Prime Minister, they deal with foreign policy. And the Minister of State deals with appointments. We sometimes say that they go for funerals and marriages. And this is the kind of role that is assigned to the Minister of State. It's not a very important assignment. But we can see that she was not in that kind of role. She was in the role of an advisor to the Prime Minister, to remind to him or recall to him those moments which were very relevant after 1962. So I suspect that from 1962 to 64, she played an extremely important role in the Prime Minister's life, Pandit Nehru's. So that is probably a bigger contribution than what she could have made to foreign policy, because Pandit Nehru could have made foreign policy himself. He did not need anybody's help. But the fact that he identified her at an early stage in her life and groomed her for high and important positions. And if Lakshmi and Menon was so inclined, she would have gone to higher offices in the government of India. Well, she left the ministry the year I joined, so I did not have the privilege of seeing her. She left in 1966 and I joined the Foreign Service in 1967. So that was just a year after she had left. And therefore we had very good impact. We could see the kind of impact she had left, basically because she was the first lady to be so visible, and also because of her qualities of head and heart. And that is why she always spoke about the rights of women. She was not a feminist in any sense, if you read any of her writings, which you should all know, because her purpose was to uplift the society as a whole, including women, without asking for a special privilege for women. That I never saw her in her writings. So, though what we see is only the top tip of the iceberg, she has done considerable work on foreign policy for Pandit Nehru and the Ministry of External Affairs. And when we recall her today, I think we should recall also her contribution to India's foreign policy. I don't see in any of her speeches anything different from what we now understand as India's foreign policy. Its non-alignment and its value has remained. And also the very fact that we were not going to depend on other people. Because he said once or twice that nobody else can guarantee freedom for us. Our freedom we have to secure. We are realizing more and more and more. You may depend on Soviet Union, we did for a long time. And now we seem to be depending on the United States. But essentially, India has to be on its own. And that, I think, is the message that she gave even after Panditji's departure. So I'm sure, and I'm very unfortunate that she was in Trivandrum for many years after I joined the Foreign Service, but I never had a chance to go and speak to her about foreign policy. That would have been a great opportunity. Somehow it did not happen. But my mother-in-law knew her. They went to all these women's conferences together. So I heard stories about her. So in a way, it's all very well that we got this opportunity to hear about her, listen about her, and also to educate myself of what a great personality she was. Thank you very much for asking me to say a few words on this occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That was an amazing insight into her contribution into the foreign policy. As you said, we don't know much about that. And truly, she never spoke much about that in public. And more so in AIWC, we tend to focus more on work in the AIWC. But as we have seen over these 15 sessions that we are having of our past presidents, most of them were contributing in the national life also. So this is one aspect of Srimati Lakshmi Menon that we are going to see today, and we have seen through your speech. And thank you so much, sir. Thank you for taking time out and being with us. So we go over to our next speaker, that is Professor Indira Rama. She's from Mysore University and is a sociologist. She's going to talk about the contribution of Srimati Lakshmi Menon as the AIWC president and patron. Professor Indira is formerly professor and chairperson of the Department of Sociology at the University of Mysore and is the immediate past president of Indian Sociological Society. She is an invited faculty in the School of Social Sciences, the Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences, Bangalore, and SDM Institute of Management in Mysore. She has been a member of several advisory boards of research organizations all over India, including JNU and Delhi University, and is a two-time Fulbright Scholar, four-time Shastri Fellow, and a Senior Fellow of the ICSSR. And Madam, you have also been a visiting faculty of several India programs, study India programs in USA and Canada. And you have authored several books and articles in journals, edited volumes in newspapers in English and Kannada. And I believe, as I can read from your long CV, that you are still writing and contributing to especially to the Kannada daily Prajavani. And also the most interesting thing about you is that you are also into translating, from Kannada to English and vice versa. And also bringing out glossary of sociology, which I'm sure is going to be very useful for not only, scholars, but for students equally. you are into gender studies also. So we are glad to have you over as a speaker for this session, true academician, as I can see. Over to you, ma'am. You can start your talk. Thank you.
Good evening. Namaste. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Madam President, my sisters of the AIWC and all my friends, it's been a great pleasure part of this. The last few days have been a great learning experience for me. And I really don't have much to say because a lot has already been said about Lakshmi Menon and her life and her contributions. So I have made an attempt to understand her insights when she was president of the AIWC and then continued to be its patron. And so I must say that, like I've been hearing and I've also, it's been a great, what shall I say, for me, an eye-opener to be part of all the trials that we have had and the meetings that have been arranged by Ushaji and friends here. Because the more I read about her, the more I hear about her, I must confess I feel very small. Because part of systems where people do little and speak so much about themselves. And here is a leader, a person who did so much and yet did not even showcase what she did. So I have written down my thoughts and I would like to read because I think that gives me greater focus. I will start now and I hope I have time. Lakshmi Menon was in every sense of the word a leader par excellence, a multitasker, a social activist who put others above self, and a role model whose ideologies and actions carried a message that went well beyond the times. She first came into contact with the AIWC in 1928 when she was 29 years old and when its second session was held at Delhi. She described the AIWC as an organization which works for the welfare of this country, especially its women and children. Its goals include achievement of communal harmony, national unity, and national self-respect. Its aims and objectives, its ideals and dreams are for the establishment of a free, happy, and united India. End quote. Lakshmi Menon, who was the 24th president of AIWC, held that office from 1955 to 57. Prior to assuming office as its president, she was its secretary general and editor of its quarterly journal. This means that she became the president only after discharging many responsibilities in AIWC. To quote her, I have been through the entire range of offices of the conference offers to its members. In fact, there is not one job that I have not done, from minute secretary to vice presidentship. Now the presidentship, I presume, is the recognition that years of devotion to the conference should be crowned with heavier responsibilities. Unquote. This gives a clear message to all those who aspire only for higher offices, even in civil society organizations, that it is necessary to climb the ladder from bottom to top and not try to reach the top rung directly. Discharging multiple responsibilities in bureaucracy, both at the national and international level, and yet finding time to take upon the responsibility of serving AIWC is a rare quality which shows that she's a true role model. Between 1948 and 1966, she held several key positions in national and international bodies and still found the time and space to take the responsibility of the presidentship of AIWC also during this period. The responsibilities she shouldered in this period, 1948 to 66, included alternate delegate India at UN General Assembly, head of UN section on status of women and children, member of Rajya Sabha, parliamentary secretary, deputy minister, and minister of state for external affairs. The fact that she was president of AIWC between 1955 and 1958, when she was a minister of state for external affairs, shows her concern for social activism and again conveys a clear message to those who always use their personal and professional standing not only to shy away from social engagement, but also to maintain a distance from the grassroots. The fact that she was conferred the Padma Bhushan, the third highest civilian award in India in the year 1957, when she was president of AIWC, and how she remained grounded and never lost the focus of her life, leaves us in awe about how a statesman of such an outstanding caliber could be so simple, humane, and people-centric. As president of AIWC, Lakshmi Menon's concern was always for women from the marginalized sections. Her work centered on the premise that women do not constitute a homogeneous category. The Constitution of India has conferred equal rights on all genders, but due to the socio-economic inequalities inherent in our society, there is a gap between conferment of equal rights and equal utilization of these rights. Women's emancipation can be achieved only when equality gets translated into equity, and Lakshmi Menon was conscious of this when she observed, I quote, "It's not enough that we secure rights and opportunities for women. We should also watch and see that these rights and opportunities are not infringed," unquote. As president of AIWC, she laid stress on addressing the problems of workers in such sectors as plantations and mining, to quote only a few. She also worked for creating educational opportunities for women who could not go to schools or colleges because she believed that learning was a lifelong experience because of the challenges they faced in their life. In her thought and deeds, it was this group of women that she focused on while charting an action plan for AIWC. She no doubt recognized the work that AIWC had done in changing the life situations of women in marginalized groups. But she always said, I quote, "It was not enough that the organization should do more," unquote. As president of AIWC, she laid stress on welfare and social work and emphasized the need to build women's skills and user knowledge for bringing the economy closer to women's life situations and also their felt needs. She had imbibed the need for ideas such as gender budgeting and gender mainstreaming in women's development initiatives nearly half a century ago, and we are talking about these notions as if they have been discovered only recently. This view of Lakshmi Menon definitely needs to be revisited in times when markets controlled by capitalists and neo-colonial institutions are widening the divide between those in comfort zones and persons in socially disadvantaged positions. This is especially true in the case of women. I'd like to quote her when she, in her presidential address delivered in 1955, said, I quote, "Men usually talk in terms of wealth, increased production, capital formation, standards of and other equally material and tangible things. These things have their place in life, but if we concentrate only on these things, it's quite possible that life itself may not be available for us. But it is also imperative that we reinforce it by those qualities and values of community living, which make community living in the larger sense possible," unquote. That this organization could be applied to the role of civil society institutions, such as voluntary groups and microcredit institutions, which are emerging as women's development organizations in contemporary times. Though she had an active career in India's political life, even when she was president of AIWC, what stood out in her persona was the value she placed on inclusiveness. a concept which we are using in our discourses on social justice today. For her, it was neither party nor power that was important, but achievement of human freedom and self-respect, as reflected by the trust she placed on such values and practices as religious toleration, state-civil society partnership, national solidarity, gender-just laws, a national system of education, registration of marriages, and giving insurance coverage to women, just to mention only a few. Lakshmi Menon continued her commitment to the social cause till the end of her life. Her life stands as a testimony to the philosophy that true leaders do not have any time frame to dedicate their lives to social service. She's so different from hundreds of contemporary leaders for whom social concern is only tokenist. After her return to Kerala, Lakshmi Menon was actively involved in the activities of Gandhi Smarak Nidhi, Vinoba Niketan, Mitra Niketan, and Sharda Mission to work for enhancing the quality of life for those groups deprived of socio-economic resources. She was a strong crusader of the anti-alcohol movement, as she was aware of the damage that addiction caused to families in general and women in particular. Of special concern to her was the tragic impact that alcohol addiction had on tribal life and livelihood. Her work with this most vulnerable group stands out as a model for those with a true commitment to combating the widespread damage that liquor addiction has done to those who stand at society's margins. I would like to end by saying, both as president and a lifetime patron of AIWC, Lakshmi Menon's vision, work plan, and strategies had a relevance well beyond the times in which she lived. Parliamentarian, social activist, grassroots worker, writer, civil society leader, mentor, policymaker, and analyst, and a revolutionary who had strong convictions about her visions and actions, and an epitome of human values. Lakshmi Menon stands out as a thought leader whose work and life are timeless. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I would like to thank AIWC, Ushaji, and all friends and seniors here for making me part of this event. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Indira. That was truly enlightening. We got to know how Srimati Lakshmi Menon worked for AIWC. Through her vision, she worked on it like a mission, and she achieved unachievable goals in AIWC. And what we see AIWC today, I think most of right from the building, the land is especially her contribution here. And it's amazing to be part of this organization. We all feel great when we hear such things about our ancestors. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for being with us. Now we move ahead with our program, and we go to the final segment of today's presentations. This is next speaker would be Dr. Vijay Lakshmi. She is a member of the AIWC branch of Chirayan Kidil from Kerala. She's going to present a PPT, and she's going to talk about the final years of Srimati Lakshmi Menon in Trivandrum from 1967 to 1994. Dr. Vijay Lakshmi is a member and of the Health Trust in the AIWC and is a member of the branch of Kerala. Truly an educationist and a social scientist, a women's studies specialist and a development specialist. She's an author of books and has contributed articles in several journals. You have attended several international conferences of the UN and IAW and have represented AIWC there. And you have been a member of several state committees and departments and organizations in the state. You are currently working as the director, Sandeepani School, and you are the chairperson of Women Empowerment and Human Resources in the Development Center of India. So over to you, Vijay Lakshmi ji, with your presentation. You are going to talk about the final years of Srimati Lakshmi Menon. You can share the screen.
Yudhika ji.
We take a moment to share this screen. Good evening, all. Let me first express my gratitude to Mrs. Srila Kakade, President of the Women's Conference, for an opportunity to share space with and here today. For me personally, to be part of this webinar because I had an opportunity to visit and interact with Mrs. Menon for a long period related to my PhD work. I am fortunate to enjoy hospitality many times in the beginning of 1990s. Now, our previous speakers beautifully narrated Lakshmi Menon's life journey from childhood to the end of her professional life. I tried to share her meaningful social work intervention from 1967 to 1994 after she returned to her hometown, Trivandrum. These are some of the organizations Mrs. Lakshmi and Menon actively involved in Kerala. There are many more minor and major organizations and movements Mrs. Menon involved in different times. Like organizations, Lakshmi and Menon closely associated with many personalities in Trivandrum. A very few among them are here. Due to her devotion to Gandhian principles and philosophy, soon after her arrival in Trivandrum, she joined Gandhi Smaraka Nidhi, a center for Gandhian activism and study. Sri P. Gopinathan Nair shared his memory in his age of 100 very clearly about Lakshmi and Menon's affinity towards women empowerment. She initiated some new activities for Gandhi Smaraka Nidhi for forming neighborhood women groups for addressing substance abuse. She always kept empathy for marginalized grassroots level women. Again, he remembered her intervention in Arivipuram, a small village where alcoholic violence was at the maximum during that time. They conducted house visits and spoke to women from every household for several months. Let us see his words, Since it is in Malayalam, I can translate it into English.
തിരുവനന്തപുരത്തെ പാളയത്തിന്റെ താഴെ ഒരു വലിയ പഴയ കുടുംബത്തിലെ അംഗമായിരുന്നു.
അതെ സ്ത്രീകളുടെ ഉന്നമനത്തിന് വേണ്ടി പ്രത്യേകം ശ്രദ്ധ എടുത്തിട്ട് സ്ത്രീകൾക്ക് വേണ്ടി പ്രത്യേകം താല്പര്യം എടുത്തിട്ട്
സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യത്തിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടുള്ള പല പരിപാടികൾ കാര്യമായി നടന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. മദ്യനിരോധനത്തിൽ വരുന്നതിനുള്ള ഒരു കാരണം പല വീടുകളിലും മദ്യം കഴിച്ച ആളുകൾ ഈ സ്ത്രീകളെ വളരെ കഷ്ടപ്പെടുത്തുന്നതിനെ തടയുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് അങ്ങനെയുള്ള രംഗങ്ങളിൽ പല ഘട്ടങ്ങളിലും മുന്നോട്ട് പോയിട്ടുണ്ട്. സ്ത്രീ സമത്വം, സ്ത്രീ സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യം, സ്ത്രീകളുടെ
Vinoba Niketan is one of the oldest and renowned organization in Kerala, founded in the year 1954 by Parivarjaga Rajamma, fondly called Amma. Lakshmi Menon started her association with the Vinoba Niketan, and in the early days, she tried to bring a thorough socio-economic and cultural changes in the center. She organized a unique way of interventions, not only inside Vinoba Niketan, but in and around the center where tribes, marginalized and rural poor were living.
Amma fondly remembered the continuous visits to tribal colonies during the evening hours when the men came back to colony after their work. Amma said Lakshmi Menon wanted to witness the arrival of alcoholic men and their behavior towards women. Her consideration and affection towards the rural women victims of alcoholic violence surprised even Amma in many occasions. She was the key advisor who led the transition of ashram into women's organization in 1974, and in 75, Vinoba Nigetan was declared as an international center, international women's center. Mitra Niketan is a world-renowned organization started in the year 1956 by Patma Shri Vishwanathan, Mrs. Sethu Vishwanathan, present director of Mitra Niketan, shared her memories of Mrs. Menon's association with Mr. Vishwanathan and Mitra Niketan. Lakshmi Menon was the chairperson of Mitra Niketan from 1974 to 1982. During this tenure, Mrs. Menon was instrumental in bringing many national and international programs into Mitra Niketan. She efficiently formulated strategies for implementing the programs for giving maximum benefits to the women folk. Her dream was to uplift women by providing education, employment, and livelihood support. Mrs. Vishwanathan recollected that Mrs. Lakshmi Menon's association with the Mitra Niketan was not an ornamental one. She personally visited Mitra Niketan on all important days and supervised each and every activities of the center diligently. Mrs. Sethu Vishwanathan is still emotional on recollecting the last official function Lakshmi Menon attended in their company for felicitating Mr. T.N. Session, then the Chief Election Commissioner of India. She suffered a fall at her residence after the function in the same day and was hospitalized around 20 days. This was Mrs. Menon's last official program and her final days. Padmini Nair of All India Women's Conference Trivandrum branch was closely associated with Lakshmi Menon, and she remembered Lakshmi Menon as simple, honest, and sincere human being. Mrs. Menon treated everyone equally. She recollected the occasion of then Vice President Mr. K.R. Narayan visited here in her house in Trivandrum. Many VIPs and their wives rushed into her home, promising help, but she denied respectfully. This is an example she stated. Padmini Nair very proudly said that the sari shore was gifted by Mrs. Menon, and she kept it as a token of their friendship. We can listen her words.
Just like, I was wearing some ordinary sari, and when Mrs. Menon just got very angry with me, are you wearing this type of sari? You're going to a place where that chief is wearing or wears only khadi tones. And I said, madam, I don't have khadi things. Okay, wait. And she went inside and took a khadi sari for me. This sari which I'm wearing is donated, given to me by Mrs. Menon. So I'm very proudly still keeping that sari. Very happy I'm keeping that sari with me. Just like, I
Lakshmi and Menon's association with the P.N. Panikkar and Canford was a turning point in the history of Canford. During that time, imparting non-formal education through NGOs was the norms in Kerala. Being a founder member of Canford and her active association with the other organizations like Gandhi Smaraganidhi, Mitra Niketan, Vinoba Niketan, etc., created a new history of establishing non-formal education centers across Trivandrum district. By creating a network of organizations, she was able to share knowledge and benefits mutually. Lakshmi Menon was successful in this linking strategy because she worked for the organizations selflessly and sincerely. Her involvement in Khadi paved way for bringing women into Khadi industries. Being a member of many organizations at the same time, Lakshmi and Menon enabled mutual interactions and support among them. Lakshmi and Menon's involvement with the Alcohol and Drug Information Center is another achievement, not in her life, but the lives of lakhs of women in Kerala. She fought fearlessly for eradicating the use of alcohol from the society and mobilized dharnas, padayatra, and many more intelligent strategies to wipe out the ill effects of alcohol and substance abuse. During her days in Trivandrum, she and A.P. Udayapanu worked together against the social menace till her last breath. Lakshmi and Menon's association with the Ramakrishna Ashram and Sharada Mission in Trivandrum started in the year 1980. She was highly attracted towards the social activities of ashram, especially the empowerment speeches and classes given to women in Sharada Mission. During that time, a good number of women from different families were members as well as attendees of classes regularly, and Lakshmi and Menon believed that these classes will give strength and courage to women to face challenges in their life. She also guided some of the social initiatives of Sharada Mission. In 1993, she registered a will to donate her home and property to Sharada Mission in Trivandrum. Professor Nandan Menon was a force of constant encouragement and support for all her social activities. After Nandan Menon's demise, Mrs. Menon donated the vast collection of books to Trivandrum Public Library, where they have a separate session on Nandan Menon's collection. This presentation will not be complete without mentioning two very important associates of Lakshmi Menon, Prep Trivandrum and All India Women's Conference. Mrs. Gomati Nair was very closely associated with Mrs. Menon and respectively called her Lakshmi Adati. That means Chechi. She shared many incidents and occasions spent with her and used to stay along with her in Plainview many days. And she used to tell that Lakshmi Menon is a good host. Then again, she used to share many times. Lakshmi Menon was her mentor in AWC. Due to her old age, she couldn't send her video. Another important personality is Mrs. Indira Ramakrishna Pillai. Indira Ramakrishna Pillai started All India Women's Conference Trivandrum branch with the presence and blessings of Lakshmi Raghuramaya and Leela Damodara Menon. She served as the chairperson of Social Welfare Board, Kerala State, and for a long period, she was the president of Sri Varagham Vanitha Samadhi. We can listen her words. It would be better to listen her words.
Namaskaram. I am happy to welcome all of you, participants of this webinar, both from All India Women's Conference and from outside. My association with Lakshmi and Menon was quite unexpected. In 1957, I accompanied my husband to Delhi to attend the concluding function of the training that he was undergoing at the Indian Institute of Public Administration, of which Professor Nandan Menon was the director then. As soon as we reached our room in the attached hostel, Surprisingly, there was a phone call for me, and I heard a gentle but firm voice. Indira, this is Lakshmi Menon. You must come with Ramakrishna Pillai for breakfast with me tomorrow. She spoke in Malayalam. I asked my husband who this Lakshmi Menon was. He said that was Lakshmi and Menon, our union minister and wife of our director, Professor Nandan Menon. She has invited our batch for breakfast tomorrow. I got more surprised. I have never met her before, but something in her voice and tone was so familiar, so endearing, that I was immediately drawn towards her. Such was the magic charm of her personality. In 1971, I joined the University Women's Association Trivandrum as a member. Very soon, Lakshmi and Menon became its president, and I took over as a secretary. Many people warned me, you are going to have a very tough taskmaster. Yes, she was indeed a very stern taskmaster, very frank and outspoken. She expected perfection and honesty from her workers and a capacity for real hard work. It was my great privilege to have worked with her in the University Women's Association, later in All India Women's Conference for a long period of 25 years. Ever since I started working with her, she was my mentor, my guru, my friend, philosopher and guide. She has touched my life in many ways and enriched it. She taught me the courage to face life with all its ups and downs. Plainview became a night I frequented to share my joys or sorrows, or to seek advice at moments of crisis. Always when I stepped out of the ancient doorway framed by green creepers, I felt a different person, fully recharged with new enthusiasm, new confidence in myself, and new commitment and dedication to do my work.
Mrs. Menon fought tirelessly against every injustice that she came across. It is important to recall her contributions to the society, to inspire future generations of women to rise up to the challenges faced by society today. My special thanks to Mrs. Usha Nair, who is the soul behind this presentation. Usha, your commitment to make this program a success is highly appreciable. Your support is invaluable. I thank the President, Secretary, Treasurer, Supriyaji, Yudagaji, all for organizing this wonderful seminar for the benefit of women. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vijay Lakshmi. Thank you. That was such a nice presentation, and we didn't know that even after going from here in Trivandrum, she did so much work, especially her work at the Sharda mission and the spirituality and, you know, the very spirit of donating everything. That is worth emulating. I think we all should learn from this. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I think we are at the end of the show today. And if I can see our patrons are here, someone wants to say something about, because I'm sure people today are here who have met Srimati Lakshmi Menon, and maybe they would want to recount we have some 5 minutes more so we can share some experiences. Anyone wants to say something? A comment maybe? Veena ji, Mrs. Veena Kohli, Mrs. Veena ji.
Can I just add one or two points of interest? Which,
sure.
Which may interest the members of AIWC. It has already been mentioned that Professor Nandan Menon was the director of Indian Institute of Public Administration, which now I think is on the outer ring road. They have a huge building there. But actually, IIPA was the first tenant of AIWC. When AIWC was allotted the property on 6 Bhagwan Das Road, it had a palatial bungalow. And since we were really hard up for money, the AIWC people, they occupied just 1 or 2 rooms, and rest of the building was rented out. And it was Indian Institute of Public Administration under the directorship of Professor Nandan Menon, who had taken it on rent at that time. So we can say that even our financial position started with Professor Nandan Menon and IIPA. And then again, as Bhuneshwari mentioned, Professor Nandan Menon's nephew was the one who was responsible for starting the Institute of Hotel Management in Pusa, which is now considered the #1 hotel management institute in India. So,
Yeah.
these are some of the things that we see these institutions, and then now when you see it, you can recollect these connections that it has with AWC. Thank you.
That is so interesting to know. That is so good that they not only gave the land, they also gave the they also put it up on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we never knew about this.
Yes, that's truly amazing.
I want to say one or two things.
Yes, Binaji. Yeah.
That I closely work with Mrs. Menon, and also whatever Usha Nair has mentioned, that there was a hotel management course, and I was the part of that thing. At that time, I just joined the AIWC, and I gave the exam also as hotel management, and I stood first in that hotel management. Mr. Verma was the trainer of our training in hotel management, and everything was there, and big rooms and high ceiling of this building was there. And I have memories of that time.
Yeah.
Few memories of that time.
So many gems are coming out today from this webinar. I'm sure there are other recollections from other people here.
And I'm sure there must be a lot of first-hand experiences of our Delhi people.
And Sheilaji, considering what they did for the organization and the renting out, nowadays we discuss that for AWC. That's a very good idea to rent out. But then IIPA type institutions should be approached, for, as we were discussing, this is what our ancestors have shown the way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we can learn something. Anybody else who would like to throw some light or maybe would like to recount some experiences here?
I'm sure a lot of senior people may have met her in person at Delhi. Could be possible.
I think then shall we close the program, Sheilaji?
Before that, can I just say 2 words, since South
Usha.
Zone was given the responsibility of developing this webinar. I would like to thank Bhuneshwari and Vijay Lakshmi for the extraordinary efforts that they put in to prepare these presentations. As many people had mentioned, it is very, very difficult to come across information about this great lady, because she never wanted any publicity for any of her work or for any other aspect of her life. She even refused permission to writers to write her biography. The only biography available in Malayalam came out after her demise. So, it was really difficult to dig out these information, and both of them made great efforts to actually go and visit people, interview them, collect the information. And I know that for the past 1 month or so, both of them have been really engrossed in this work. And I'm grateful to Amita of Bangalore branch, because my Karnataka branches were associating with us in developing this. She gave us the contact to Professor Indira, and she is such an amazing personality. You read out her resume, you can already see that what great work she has done at the academic level, and especially with the tribal people. And now we are very happy to be in touch with her, and we have already discussed how we can take this association forward. We hope to work with her in many of the projects that we may envisage in the future. And also to Mr.
It will be my honor.
Thank you.
Ushaji, can I add one thing here? You just mentioned the autobiography, the biography.
It is a biography in Malayalam.
So can we have it in English with the efforts if Srimati, Professor Indira agrees? You may think of
No,
translating.
her language is Kannada, but then I can just tell you an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Bhuneshwari has done so much research into Lakshmi and Menon's work and gone into even the parliamentary debates and what have been her interventions. So just yesterday she was mentioning to me that now that we know so much about Lakshmi Menon, why don't we just collaborate and write a biography? So maybe, we'll end up doing that.
Right,
After all
right.
this research
All
work
the
that has
material
gone into
that you
this.
have. Yeah.
So all of us together may sit together and do it.
Yes.
Let us see. I hope that the God blesses us to take this forward. Because there is a rich amount of information that is available, but it is not all put in one place. So it's very difficult for anybody to study Lakshmi and Menon. We have also submitted proposals to the University of Kerala to bring out a monograph on her and also get PhD students to take up studies about her. And we have offered that all the material that we have available in the MCM library can be made available to them. So let us hope that we are able to take this forward. So thank you, all of you, Sheila Kakreji.
Thank you very much, Usha.
Supriya, all of you. And
thank you.
Supriya has done
I
a great
really
job.
feel so happy that I could give this work to you people and you have done the best of it. Wonderful job done.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Wonderful job done.
For the formal vote of thanks now, I would like
Yes.
to invite our Joint Secretary, Mrs. Supriya Bhalirao, for the formal vote of thanks.
Yes,
Supriya?
yes. Thank you. Thank you, Yutika. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, all. And this is Supriya Bhalirao, Joint Secretary, AIWC, delivering the formal vote of thanks for today's webinar on our past President, Padma Bhushan Lakshmi Nandan Menon. And this day happens to be her death anniversary. And remembering her is feeling so good. Firstly, I thank Mrs. Sheila Kakre, our President of AIWC, for initiating this webinar series on the past presidents to know about their personal lives and their enormous social work. This has given us the opportunity to get to hear some of the eminent speakers all along and the concerned branches where these presidents belonged. Got a chance to do a lot of extraordinary work and present it in the form of the research outcome. We are feeling very happy about it. This has led into the amazing inspiration all of us have received. This is going to prove us useful in the long run. Thank you, Sheila ji. I also thank Kuljit ji, our Secretary General, and thank you, Rehana ji, our Treasurer, for their complete involvement in this, which is really mattering. I thank our guest speakers now. Firstly, I would thank the relatives of Mrs. Menon, Mrs. Shanta Prahlad, Mrs. Menon's nephew's wife, Mr. V.K. Achyut Menon, Mrs. Lakshmi N. Menon's nephew, 3 grandchildren of Lakshmi Narayan Nair, who was a cousin and close friend of Mrs. Lakshmi N. Menon, and Mrs. Lakshmi. Those 3 are Mrs. Lakshmi Ravindran, Mr. Madan Venugopal, and Sri Lakshman for sharing their personal experiences. Thereafter, actually, we are very fortunate to have Mr. T.P. Srinivasan from Indian Foreign Service, ambassador and diplomat, for giving us that excellent insight into the Minister Lakshmi N. Menon's work as a spokesperson of India, as an advisor to the Prime Minister. We are very, very fortunate to have him today with us. Thereafter, I thank Usha Nairji specially for presenting Shashi Tharoor's video, giving us the information on Lakshmi N. Menon's remarkable work at the United Nations. And I thank Professor Indira Ramarao from Mysore University for giving us a very nice information on Mrs. Lakshmi and Menon's work as AIWC President. I now thank our own AIWC sisters who have done superb work of collecting information and presenting it in flawless manner. Firstly, Mrs. Usha Nair for putting an amazing agenda together for this webinar and arranging the speakers and the relatives of Lakshmi and Menon and guiding the entire team till the end of members actually. I thank Mrs. Bhuneshwari Ravindran for preparing that wonderful PowerPoint presentation and presenting it so well. I thank you for going around to the relatives' houses, Bhuneshwari ji, for recording and presenting the videos of all the relatives of Lakshmi and Menon. And last but not the least, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi for producing that excellent PPT, including those video bits with and presenting it to us, which is actually, we are very fortunate to have, you all putting in work together and we getting to view them. Thank you so much. Now I thank our patrons, Mrs. Beena Jain and Mrs. Veena Kohli, who are always present at this one and all the other webinars, which is really a mark of encouragement to the series. Thank you both, ma'ams. I thank all the vice presidents present here today, and I thank all zonal organizers and all the members in charges attending this particular session. I thank all the guests who are present with us and you all, without whom this program can't be complete. Last and not the least, our own Dr. Yutika, MIC of MCM Library, for being a great host. Yutika, thank you so much. And all the participants I thank again. I announce that the webinar ends here, but you can continue chatting.
Yeah.
And remember 24th December.
Yeah, 24th December. We are going to have Mrs. Raksha Sharan and Srimati Menon Lam, together in one seminar on 24th December. See you there, and we sign out here.
Sheila ji and the AIWC member, it was an excellent program and hearty congratulations, Usha. Very, very well organized. Thank you all so much. It was so wonderful.
Thank you, Padma ji. And we meet again on 24th.
Usha is always wonderful, whatever she does.
Thank you, Kuljit ji. You are part of the team. You are a team. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sheila ji. Thank you, Usha ji.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Usha ji.
Fantastic. Vijay Lakshmi. Fantastic program.
Thank you.
Excellent. Madam, excellent. Very well organized.
Thank you.
Program.
Actually, हम लोग की तरफ से भी thanks.
We must thank Indira Pillai also for participating and sharing experience.
That was
Usha's
wonderful
mom.
to hear her. Very
Usha's
nice.
mother. It's very sweet of her.
It's turning out to be really amazing research work. Everyone.
Yes. Yeah. And great motivation Everyone for is all of doing us. such a good work. Wonderful work people are putting in. Unbelievable.
And
it's so nice to hear about all our patrons. My God, wonderful.
And उनके relatives जो बताते हैं. That's so much more,
They also must be feeling so proud. इतने सालों के बाद, they are still remembering them.
True.
और आज का date ना, it really fell in place, 30th. When I was calculating, then I said कि 30th November we must keep from Lakshmi Menon. So we adjusted, आगे पीछे थोड़ा 2 together, single ऐसे करके. And we made it possible for 30th November.
Actually, those videos are really big, like 15 minutes and all they had given. We had to
edit it.
Edit it and make it.
Bhuneshwari ji,
But
you
Bhuneshwari
edited
ji, you have put in a lot of hard work.
We could see that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
But it
enjoy
gives pleasure.
it.
It gives pleasure and satisfaction, you know.
Yeah, lot of satisfaction.
So we forget about the pains that we have taken.
Yeah,
And
the
Bhushan was always
product
there
is
to
so
advise.
good. The end product is so good that, you know, you
Yes.
feel
Yeah.
so good.
Thank
True.
God. The
And
network
those
was
presidents,
We were
no, they
supported.
become your favorite, no?
Mm.
About whom
Pardon?
you are going to present and write, they become your favorite presidents.
Oh, wow.
For me, Rajkumari Amrit is so close. It
That
looks
is
so close
right.
to me.
Yes,
Just like
every
that.
president and secretary also.
Yeah.
President and secretary also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we
Okay.
close down
Bye,
now?
madam.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Shelly. That
Thank
was
you
great.
so much.
Great
Thank you.
effort.
Okay, bye.
Hey, everyone. Bye,
Bye.
Sheilaji. Bye,
Bye,
Kulji.
Usha.
Bye, bye,
Bye,
everyone.
Thank you.